Papi, es que creo que me van a aceptar en el club de los culísimos.
¿Los qué? ¿Cómo? ¿Los qué?
You know, achero, cool, los culísimos.
Culísimo. Mira que uno tiene que oír basura al cabo del día en esta casa.
Say hello, America. We are part of the new U.S.A.
Hi, everyone. This is Qué Pasa podcast. This is a watch-along series for what many consider the iconic sitcom series Qué Pasa, U.S.A. of the 1970s. Let's roll back time a little bit. On April 30th, 1977, the nation's first bilingual sitcom, Qué Pasa, U.S.A., premiered nationwide. 39 weeks out we are now from the 50th anniversary of this iconic show. And it was 39 half-hour episodes that were produced by Community Action and Research, together with WPBT Channel 2, the PBS station based here in Miami. Community Action and Research, or CAR, was established by Manny Mendoza, who created the show, a bilingual sitcom exploring the dynamics of a multi-generational Cuban family living in Miami's Little Havana neighborhood in the 1970s. So while Manny created the concept and the premise for the show, it was Jose Bamonde, or Pepe, the executive producer of the show, who gave the characters life. He gave them their names. He had a big hand in how Pepe, Juana, Adela, Antonio, Carmen, and Joe were developing as characters and how they played into the story and what their dynamics were. And of course, head writer Luis Santeiro, who came into the show from the very first episode to breathe life not only into the storylines and the themes that were going to be touched upon, but also to breathe life into new characters like Violeta and Sharon. So together, they worked with a host of talented people who we will talk about throughout this podcast series. I'm Mimi Belt, and I was present for part of the creation of Qué Pasa almost 50 years ago, which, okay, fine, you do the math. When I was introduced to the show in 1977, I was 19 and only dreaming of doing television. And I always say the show was my school, because watching it behind the scenes gave me a really good idea of how television was made. The show had an impact on me in more than one way. I married Manny and had a son with him who is here today. Hi.
Hey, how's it going? I'm the son. I'm Dani Mendoza, he, him, and we are going to be doing the Qué Pasa podcast together. Watching back the entirety of the show, one episode at a time, for the 50th anniversary coming up in April of 2027. So we're really excited to dig into it. We do owe a bit of thanks in terms of inspiration for the format to both Song Exploder and Dice Exploder, both of which inspired us to take a specific approach to this format here. We are going to talk about the episode at hand more broadly, which for this one is the pilot. But we're also going to dig into it through specific elements of it. So where we're putting a little twist on the idea of, hey, take one song and break it apart. Or in the case of Dice Exploder, hey, take one game mechanic brought in by the guest and discuss the game through the lens of that. Here, we're each going to pick one element of the episode at hand, and we're going to talk about those elements individually and in conversation with each other. And in so doing, we are going to talk about the episode more broadly, the show more broadly, and some other cultural elements together. So, with that having been said, do you want to dive right in, Mom?
Sure. So we're going to begin first with, obviously, the pilot episode, Fiesta de Quince. This one directed by Errol Falcon. Errol, I hope you're listening. Happy 50th to you as well, sir. This was a particularly poignant theme to begin a series like this with, because it does explore the coming of age of the youngest of the characters, Carmencita. And she is about to celebrate her sweet 15 party, or her Fiesta de Quince.
All right. As we do that, we are going to be diving into a little bit about what the show is about overall also, which is that this is a multi-generational bilingual sitcom, the first bilingual sitcom in American history, certainly first Spanish and English language one. Did not have any subtitles at the time. Was created by a social scientist, sociologist, and by a group of academics with a grant from the federal government to pay to make children's programming. So this was educational programming for children, specifically teenagers. It had a mandate to have in every episode a lesson of the week, essentially a takeaway. And it was rigorously designed to reflect the sociological realities of the Cuban-American multi-generational family experience, so grandparents, parents, and children, in the 1970s as an exile community, as a community of immigrants experiencing assimilation and integration, favoring integration over assimilation as a way of being at the same time fully American and fully embracing their Cuban roots.
And as we get into Fiesta de Quince, the first of these, certainly at the center of Cuban exile culture and many Latino cultures throughout the United States, is when a daughter turns 15. The idea of giving her this huge, elaborate party is always at the center of some discussion, shall we say, in families. Some folks believe that it is a little over the top. Many folks agree it is very expensive. Quite a number of families got into debt, and it hasn't died. It was definitely at the center of 1970s celebrations, but even today, girls and 15 years old of many Latin cultures in the U.S. are celebrating Fiesta de Quince with equally elaborate entrances and big dresses, or as they say in the show, big everything.
Sweet 15 parties are supposed to be big with capital B. Big ballrooms, big dresses, big...
Violeta, para.
¿Qué te pasa?
Ay, nada. I just don't want to hear about the party I know I'm not going to be having.
And so this particular episode does explore that. It explores the dichotomy of a family living in a relatively modest middle income home in Miami, struggling to do right by their daughter through this and make her happy through this party, this Fiesta de Quince, while at the same time, her very own brother, who is looking to really fit into U.S. culture, is saying, yeah, this is way over the top.
You mean you're thinking of giving Carmen a party like this?
Why, sure.
That's a mistake.
So for me, I think the most telling and the thing that always makes me really laugh out loud about this episode is the criticism of the party itself, right? For me, what I take away from it, because I also lived and breathed it, many Fiesta de Quinces that I was a part of, that I had to dance or that I had to be a part of the choreography. It was always about so elaborate a party, and was that all necessary? So one of the things that really I love about the show is when Juana comes back from taking a look at some venues and says, you know, if I pay X amount of dollars, they can fly you in to the room. But if I only have a very small budget, in this case, $10, they'll roll you out onto this stage in roller skates. So that is always very telling for me, because it was always about the price tag and equally, I guess, ridiculous in a way.
Well, so what I want to know, because I was not born until the late 80s, is how accurate was that?
Very accurate. I was in very many parties where girls did come out of seashells and swung out to the stage in a swing. And actually one of the big jokes when I was growing up was that the swing broke and she went flying across the room in one of the parties that I went to. And that was absolutely true. And that's how this show opens. This episode opens with the grandfather, with Antonio saying, hey, this girl broke a leg or hurt herself swinging into the place in a parachute made of lace.
¿A quién se le ocurre, para entrar al salón de baile, tirarse del techo con un paracaídas te encaja?
Ave María Purísima. Oye, esos shows no se daban en Cuba.
So was that typical of your experience of Quinces then? Like, is that an outlier, or is that more of the sort of baseline?
It was pretty typical. People were trying to sort of outdo one another. And there was always the group of folks who were in the 15 sort of train and trying to outdo the next one and do something different and bigger and crazier. And then there was the other group, which I belonged to, which didn't have a 15 at all. They opted to not even do the party at all. So that was the situation then. I think that still is a thing now. I mean, now you see 15 cruises and girls celebrating their 15s, many girls celebrating their 15s on the same cruise ship together, or just basically foregoing the party completely to go travel somewhere. So it really depends, but it is a tradition that has endured. And I think in this case, it was really well explored because it was very accurate. I think too, in the middle of all that was Joe wanting to belong, and Joe wanting to belong to a country that he almost was born in, right? That he grew up in his entire life. Carmen, his sister, was born in this country, and he still didn't feel a part of that of the country. So when he is brought into, and this is one of the lines that people repeat all the time, he was being considered for membership in Los Culísimos. That was a big deal to him, like to be part of the cool kids club. And in that case, turning it into Spanglish, Los Culísimos, was just as important to him as Carmen having her 15 was to her.
Papi, es que creo que me van a aceptar en el club de los culísimos.
¿Los qué? ¿Cómo? ¿Los qué?
You know, achero, cool, los culísimos.
Culísimo. Mira que uno tiene que oír basura al cabo del día en esta casa.
So that was going to be my my choice actually for this is the joke about the Cool Kids Club, which I think is ridiculously worded in a way that's perfect for the comedy of the show, and as a great setup in Spanish for the anglicization of Los Culísimos, right? Which does a few things at the same time, right? Because it does speak to that first generation or near first generation, because to your point, Joe as a character was canonically born in Cuba, so is an immigrant, is not a first generation, born here. But Carmencita, his little sister, is, and that's a deliberate decision creatively on the part of the creative team, as I understand it, to represent things sociologically usefully, right? So you've got one kid who came over very young, couldn't remember Cuba from what he said in the episode, and but was born there, right? And that's one kind of experience. And then his sister, a different kind of experience, feels like, no, I'm Cuban. She says that in the episode. I'm Cuban, and he's like, no, you're Cuban American. That resonates heavily for me, having been born in this country, right? And always feeling a liminality, right? Like I walk between worlds. I have the privilege of being able to go into all these spaces because I'm invited to them, but I don't really belong in any of them, right? Because I'm not really Cuban, but then I'm not really American in the sense that I am American, but I'm not just that, right? I'm a hyphenated American, right?
Abuelo, lo que estoy diciendo es que si la familia cubana nos sale para un lado y los americanos para el otro lado, nos van a partir por la mitad.
But when I was their age, even many decades after they were that age, I experienced a similar identity crisis sort of question, right? Of what part of this is legitimate. In my case, I experienced a little more difficulty feeling that my right to call myself Cuban was in any way legitimate, right? Part of that was language-based, and that's something that the show gets into a bit more later than in this first episode, and that was different in the 70s than it was by the time that I was experiencing it, mostly in the 90s and the aughts. But it still was relevant, right? Where their Spanish wasn't, especially I think Joe's, wasn't quite as on point as their parents and grandparents. It was closer than what I experienced, but there was still a little bit of that difference. And I wonder, when I look at that, there's two things I want to mention. One is I love the comedy in translation, right? So there is just the formal, and you as a comedy writer, I'd love to hear you talk about it from that perspective too, but like there is the formal question of the Cool Kids Club, which is ridiculous. I have to emphasize again. And Los Culísimos, which is equally ridiculous in a different way, and how that joke is a joke about translation, about anglicization, and it is at the same time deeply relatable. Like, it's funny to people because it's not too heady. It's funny to people because they recognize it. So that's one thing I want us to talk about. The other thing after that is you weren't very far off in age from the characters at the time, and you were about the same age as the actors who played those characters, because they were a bit older than the age that they played, right?
Right.
So I'd love for you to circle back around at the end, once we're done talking about the joke part, to talk about how relatable you found it to be. First, though, the joke part. As a comedy writer, as somebody who knows Luis Santero again being the lead writer for the show, who wrote this episode, the version of this episode that aired, because there was an initial version that got workshopped and then Luis got brought in. Luis has talked to both of us a little bit about it. What do you want to share with folks about this joke?
Yeah, I think the Culissimo joke actually is sort of, it represents a lot of the general approach to Qué Pasa, U.S.A. as a whole, right? To every single episode. And that was the biggest challenge was, how do you truly write a bilingual comedy where the humor lands for both English and Spanish without repeating absolutely everything you say, right? So I think the Culissimo joke resonates with so many people. People remember it for so long and repeat it over and over. It's one of those lines in the series that is repeated more than many. And that is because of a couple things. One is because you can understand Culissimo in both languages. It does have that Anglicism. It does sort of land the plane without having to explain too much, which was always what Luis said was his challenge. And I admire him tremendously because he had a very, very hard job on his hands. But then secondarily, because there is the underlying culo reference, right? And there, you can't get around it. I mean, what really cracks people up is that in him Joe innocently saying Los Culísimos, and he thinks he's being really, he's kind of saying culo, and he's shocking his parents and his grandparents.
Well, and it's worth saying that this was on public television in the 1970s, uncensored.
Right. And that it got through, right, without censorship, and that it was possible to be able to play off of the word culo that way, right? So without getting censored. So I think that was one thing, but I think it does symbolize a lot of the challenge in front of all of the creatives on this show, but particularly on Luis's shoulders and the cast's shoulders, to be able to communicate a message that was clearly understood by either English dominant or Spanish dominant folks without having to translate every line. And that's what's really incredible about this show.
Oh, he thinks he's Joe Cool now. Because he's being considered for membership by the Super Cool Club.
Oh, you mean as you Cubans put it, Los Culísimos?
This was Luis, I think. I don't want to speak for him, but wanting to make sure, and the whole team, wanting to make sure this gets across clearly. This is fundamentally what at least part, and arguably maybe all, of this episode is about. At least the Joe subplot is about that, but I would argue that all of it, to some degree, is about that thematically, right? I think it's really important that people find their way back to this and see that 50 years ago, we were already having these conversations. I'm sure we were having these conversations far before that.
And honestly had the courage to have those conversations publicly in the 1970s. And so having those conversations through humor and really showing ourselves authentically, I know people overuse that term so much, but really genuinely showing ourselves as Latino culture, Latinx culture, not just Cuban culture, for what we are, and being able to laugh at ourselves and being able to look at the things we do and the things we say in that sort of way was really brave at the time too, and it was incredible to me that there wasn't a tremendous amount of censorship for this show.
I mean, we know because we've talked to people obviously who were involved somewhat extensively, right? about it that, yeah, I mean, there were things that had to be cut out over the course. And we'll go through that as we get to those episodes. But there were a lot of wins. You know, there were a lot of things that they were able to get through. And honestly, that's just the cost of doing business. I don't mean that cynically, and I don't mean that in a way to give up or to think that it's okay, because I don't think that it's okay. But both of us have worked in film and TV virtually our entire, at least adult lives, right? Yeah. And we know that this is how it goes. You win the battles you win, right? And you keep fighting in order to keep winning the battles you can win.
Yeah.
Because you got to stay in the game if you're going to do anything, you know?
Yeah, and look, at the end of the day, I think Qué Pasa's legacy, too, is that it made us laugh. And it made us sit back and understand that here was a character like Pepe Peña, who maybe said some things that we weren't always very comfortable with, but he loved his family and he was a lovable character in spite of that. That this was a family who didn't always understand each other because of the generational divide, but always loved each other. And that in the end, we could look at the show as Americans, as Latinos, as both, as neither, and still laugh at it and still enjoy it and learn from it through joy and humor. And this was just, it was just a great and fun and wonderful experience to be a part of it, whether you're watching it or if you were lucky enough to be sitting in the audience, as I did many times, or sitting backstage and watching them rehearse. And knowing, by the way, at that time, I was not there for the pilot, but I do know that they had no idea that this show was going to be as popular as it became, that it was going to be talked about 50 years later, that it was going to win Emmys and be in the press and really be embraced by people of all cultures everywhere. I think a lot of that credit, it goes to Pepe and Luis, later the director Bernie, as well as Errol, who directed the pilot, the entire team, and the cast. Yeah. I just want to take a tiny aside here to dedicate at least this episode, if not many, to Manolo, who played Pepe, who is not with us, fairly recently passed. But just know that he was one of the, this core cast of 6, and then that is not to downplay Connie or Barbara, who played Violeta, and Sharon, who were incredible.
Or
Glenda, who played Marta la Chismosa. But the core cast of 6, definitely Pepe Peña was the heart of much controversy, and Manolo had everything to do with a lot of our most memorable moments with Qué Pasa U.S.A. and a lot of laughter and even tears that we shed, as did, in my personal opinion, Adela Martinez, who I loved and knew very, very well, and Luis Oquendo, who played the grandfather. So neither grandparent nor Manolo are with us physically today, but they are going to live on forever in this incredible show.
Yeah, I want to take a moment also to appreciate the fact that this show would not exist. This is going to sound surprising to some of you, without Norman Lear. Norman Lear was not involved in the show directly, but without a love for what was already being done with Archie Bunker, which is a bit of an inspiration for Pepe Peña, right? In like, when did the show start? All in the Family.
All in the Family.
Well, started a few years
70s,
earlier,
yeah,
right?
early 70s.
We'll check that. I think it was maybe 72. In All in the Family, if that social satire with a smile had not been inspiring the team already to do this kind of work, then this show wouldn't exist. So we owe a debt of gratitude for the artistic inspiration there. Like with Archie Bunker, Manolo was not Pepe Peña, right, in real life at all. And that he brought so much humanity to a character who in real life probably would not have been very nice to him is a testament to the enormity of his empathy, his humanity, and his talent as a performer. So thank you, Manolo, for that, for giving us an opportunity to see each other more, because it is important to see that people like Pepe Peña are people. They're not just cartoons. They're not just their worst parts or their worst opinions. They are our family, our neighbors. They are fathers who care about their families. That doesn't take away from what is unacceptable about what they say, do, and believe. It does mean that we have a choice in how we engage with them. And finally, because we're rounding out where we need to be finishing, because we said we'd be done around now, is I'm not letting you off the hook. What was it like for you to be around the same age as these characters and be about the same age as these actors, discovering this show for the first time, not just as somebody who loves watching it, but as somebody who had the privilege of being able to watch it get made and have it be a part of giving you an entryway into what has turned out to be your entire career?
Yeah, I think I was awestruck constantly. I think the feeling of seeing Ana Margarita Menendez, who's now Ana Margot playing Carmen, to see Rocky. I can't call him Stephen Bauer. He will always be Rocky to me. To see Rocky coming right out of UM to do this show for the first time. And knowing that, yes, we're basically the same age. We have the same experiences. The storylines ring true. They feel right. But to me, it was awe-inspiring to see a sitcom being produced in front of a live audience. And yes, there was audio sweetening and all kinds of things that happened after, in post-production, but it was a live audience of at least 100 people. Mm-hmm. And to sit there and be able to watch rehearsals, see them work through things, see how really television was made, and then watch it come to life in front of this audience, watch them feel their laughter, see this done as a play from top to bottom. So every episode ran from top to bottom, and they would do pickup lines after. So they never stopped. They did it like a play. The audience felt they were in the moment. And to me, that was such an interesting and fascinating experience, because I learned so much, and knowing that you could do a show top to bottom like a play, that you could run lines and remember lines across 6 or 8 or 10 characters in a scene and make it work with 3 different cameras on a set was unbelievable. So I don't know if that answered your question.
That answers part of it. The other part that I'm gonna make you go back to now is so that's the professional part, right? As a person, as a kid, basically, right? A very, very young adult. How did it resonate for you? You came from Cuba incredibly young.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And barely remember it, as I understand it. Is that right?
I don't remember it. I remember very little. Yeah.
Yeah, because you're like 2 when
I'm
you
like,
came over.
I'm like Joe, basically. I'm
right.
like Joe.
So being like Joe,
yeah.
How did this episode resonate for you at the time, and then now revisiting it again?
At the time, I have to be honest, at that time, I did not feel as torn as Joe did. At that time, I definitely felt very comfortable because I was living in Miami. I felt like I could speak both languages. I could do both things. I did not feel torn. Now, looking back on it, I realized that maybe I gave a pass here and there to things that I didn't really notice overtly at the time.
Yeah.
Or that it kind of glossed over because I, like Carmen, went to an all-girls private school that was mostly Cubanitas. Right. And so I didn't experience the kind of thing that I might have experienced had I gone to public school like Joe did. Right. And now that I've had more time and more experience, I realize that there were probably things in my life that I can remember now that I shouldn't have given a pass to, or that I shouldn't have just overlooked. But I know that at that time I thought, yeah, this is funny and this is cool, but I didn't really feel torn the way Joe did.
I get that.
Yeah.
That makes sense. I want to land us here at the end on an appreciation again for the family structure, right? The show, as we mentioned before, is predominantly focused on the experience of the kids, formally speaking, in the sense that this is formally educational content for teenagers. That is what the show was funded to be. With that having been said, looking at the pilot again in preparation for this episode, I was struck by the attention it still gave in that context to the perspective of the parents in particular. The grandparents in the pilot, a little bit less so, to be perfectly honest. But the parents, we still got insights into socioeconomic considerations. We're not going to get into all of it now because we're just about at time, but we could spend another half hour talking about all the stuff we haven't gotten into in this pilot. Like the fact that the fact that Pepe didn't want his wife to go out and get a part-time job to help pay for the party. The fact that even though Pepe was working full-time and presumably very hard, could not afford the party, right? The difficulty of trying to give everything that you could to your kids. You mentioned here, one of the kids was in private school, one of them wasn't, right? That was, I'm sure, and we can talk to Pepe and to the rest of the team to Luis about this if we want. But I expect that was done on purpose to represent, again, as broad a swath as possible. Just like you had one that was born here and one that wasn't. Well, one who is in a private school and one who's in a public school, and what are the differences in that? Also, probably couldn't afford to send both to private school, right? So they had to pick one to send. They're lucky enough they were able to do that, because the public school education at that time might have been, reasonably good, I would hope, but maybe not everything that they wanted it to be, whatever the set of reasons were. I find all of that fascinating and very efficiently communicated within the scope of comedy. And then the grandparents had really great one-liners.
Corazón, no es porque seas mi nietecito, ¿eh? Pero mira que estás sangrón.
She only needed one zinger, and you'd remember her the entire episode, right? So,
yeah, which is great. And we get to know them more in later episodes. But I just want to say that even in this pilot, as a thesis for the show, right, as a whole, which is essentially what a pilot is to some degree, it really communicated the idea that these multi-generational differences, the friction in between the generations, the differences in perspective within each generation and also between the generations is at the heart of what we're doing here. That liminality also of experience, where those boundaries are, as well as the liminality of, well, but we're Cuban, but we're American, but we're in the United States, but we feel connected to Cuba. But we're not treated by everybody here as though we belong here, but we feel that we belong here. We love it here, but we miss things at home. All of that was established in an episode about how the daughter wanted to have a sweet 15 party, quote unquote, a quince, right? But also about how Joe wanted to be considered one of the cool kids at school. He reveals because he wants to represent Cubans well, because they're not represented in school leadership. All that gets across in less time than we've been talking about it right now. So we highly recommend that we're going to try in general to try to keep these episodes to about the runtime of the show.
Minutes, yeah.
But, we're allowing ourselves a little bit more time here because it's the first episode. We're introducing you to the concept of the podcast. We highly recommend you go back and check it out. And honestly, the writing only gets better. The acting only gets better. You dig into more with all of the different characters, not just the kids, more as you go in the core cast, and even some of the ancillary characters that my mom was mentioning. So I highly recommend that you go and check out this episode. Think about sticking around with us. If you like what we're talking about, we're going to be able to give you some sort of inside information on the making of the show as we go, because of our relationships we happen to have to the people who made the show, including some people who are still around who've been kind enough to talk to us about stuff. We're going to be able to tell you stuff from the perspective that we have as people who have spent many, many decades with this show looming large in our lives, and who have spent many, many decades working in film and television in ways that are unrelated to this show. And as people who are we are Cuban American, and we experience from our different perspectives, and in combination as mother and son, elements of life that relate directly to the show. So that is what you're in for if you come check us out here. A little bit of what you've gotten so far, and a lot more in the way of what I just mentioned. Mom, you want to say anything to sign off?
No, that'll be all. I think it's fun for us and a privilege for us to be able to talk to you all about this show that we love so much and meant so much in so many ways to the community and to ourselves. I think at the heart of everything, too, you will find every show, as you see here, is the heart of this family, and how, as families will go the extra mile for their kids or their grandparents or their parents or those they love. So we just want to have fun with it. We want to honor this show and hope that you can join us.
All right. Have a great day, everybody.
Bye.
Qué pasa, qué pasa.